Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about leash reactivity. Let me go in my present mode and just expand out. So this is probably one of the most common issues that I have come up whenever we are dealing with adopters. So many times people are reaching out to us about how the dog is lunging or barking or just acting crazy on leash. It can be very embarrassing if you've never dealt with it before. I promise it's not uncommon, and do not feel embarrassed if your dog is acting out. There's a lot behind it, and we're going to go over that today. I do want to say, though, which is very interesting, dogs being on leash does not necessarily, having leash reactivity or aggression does not necessarily mean they are dog aggressive. It's not natural for, if you think about it, it's not natural for a dog to be on a leash. Back when they were not domesticated, we never put animals on leash. In fact, I think that's the only animal we do put on leashes. We don't put birds on leashes, really. We don't put cats on leashes. So it's not a very natural thing. We don't even put, I mean, look how people look when we put our kids on leashes. They think we're crazy. So it's not necessarily natural for a dog to be on it. We have domesticated them and trained them to do it, but it's not every dog is naturally going to pick up on it. Many times when they are on the leash, they feel trapped, they feel confined, they feel like they can't escape. So that's when that reactivity comes out. Just like if you see someone walking a dog and that dog sees you or another dog, they start barking or lunging or just losing their mind. It's oftentimes because they're frustrated they cannot go over there. And that leash is providing tension on them and it increases their anxiety. Do not necessarily just go over there and let them smell them because they've already had that tension on that leash. So their anxiety is too high and it's not going to be the best outcome. We're going to talk a little bit on how to work with that, and then also how to do off-leash intros with dogs. So the first thing is you definitely want to have a proper walking system. I like to go in these orders. I go to Martingale, Gentle Leader, Star Mark, and then a pinch or prong collar. I try and start off with the Martingale. If the Martingale's not working, then I'll go to the next one. I never automatically start at the end. I always try and go to the bottom and work my way up if it's not working. The way the Martingale works is if the dog pulls on the leash, it gets tighter on their neck, and if they're not pulling, it gets looser on the neck. If you watched our beginning videos on how to walk with pressure and release, this helps enforce that. And many times the dogs pick up on this. It's not always going to work for every single dog. Every dog is unique and their own individual. So that's why you have to have different options. The next one I like to use is gentle leaders. I find these to be really effective with dogs that have leash reactivity. It's not like a muzzle. It doesn't limit anything as far as their breathing or drinking or anything like that. It just, if they start being reactive, they cannot go any further because like it's hard for me to show without having a video, but if they start pulling and you're holding that leash, it physically limits how much their face can turn to be reactive. I find gentle leaders to be like a huge lifesaver for some dogs that have these issues. So I would even suggest before going into the next steps, try this one. Many times this works the best for us and we don't have to go to the next steps. The next one is a Star Mark collar. It's very similar to a kind of a prong, but it's plastic based. It's a little bit like lesser, I guess, of a correction. With these, it's made similar to the Martingale, where if they pull, it gets tighter. If they stop, it gets looser. You never want to have the dog have constant pressure on this, and they should never They should never wear this constantly. Same thing with the gentle leader. They should only be wearing this when they are going on walks. And then the final one is a pinch collars or prong collars. They get a very bad rep, and I think a lot of it's because people used to keep them on them all the time, and you see these horrible photos. It's because people didn't know you're supposed to take them off. They're only supposed to be using these when they're actually walking the dog. And I would never go to this right away. I would try different things, but for some dogs, this is the only thing that works, and it's that or they just are never walked. If you have to go to this point, if they're doing well on this, you could always try and go back down to the Star Mark. If they're doing well on that, you could even try to go back to the Martingale and go down. Because ideally, you want to be able to you could wean them off of these and go back down to a Martingale. But, you just have to work with what you can. So, I believe 2 days ago, we talked about the eye contact game. This is going to be really huge and help dealing with leash reactivity. When you're doing this and practicing this, definitely don't get as close as she is to her dog's face. This is just a Google photo that I had. But the eye contact and teaching your dog that's going to be everything, because that's going to increase that dog paying attention to you. It's going to help with their bond with you and trusting you. So you definitely want to get that 100% down. When you feel like you have that down inside your house, that's when you're going to start practicing that outside of your house. Practice it when they're on a leash and there's nobody around, no dogs. When they have that really down, that's when you're going to go to the next step. That's when you're going to go where it's going to be a little bit more crazy. I wouldn't instantly say go with that many dogs, but I would suggest like maybe only have one dog in the distance, and only do this once you have it down in the house and then outside the house, and then that's when you're going to have the outside stressor there. So you definitely want to keep enough distance. If the dog is instantly lunging, you're too close. If the dog's just completely freaking out, you're too close. You want to keep more distance. When they're in a good distance and they're staying calm, that's when you're going to keep doing that eye contact. This can take do this over days, months, whatever you have to do, just practice. And as they're getting that down, that's when you decrease the amount of space between you and those other dogs. So if you live close to a park, that's a great way to practice. Like at Forest Park, we have, there's some benches and you can get pretty far away and still have the dogs far enough in a safe way. So this is I would say the number one thing to help deal with it. The next thing I want to talk about is so many times people will tell us, this dog is aggressive, this dog is horrible with dogs. And the first thing I always say is, when they met the dog, were they on leash? And I would say 99% of the time they are. Because they are on that leash, they feel trapped, they feel constrained, so they're going to act poorly when meeting that dog. So I always recommend doing leash intros not on leash. So if you guys are interested, I can do a whole nother segment on how to do dog intros and play groups and stuff like that. It's a lot more, but I'm just going to do kind of like a brief little intro in this. At many times with adopters, I go over this and I actually demonstrate it with them. And later on, they end up adopting another dog. So it's always very rewarding to see someone that thinks their dog is dog aggressive and then later on just learns the right way to meet the dogs off leash. If you do go this way, you always want to have some sort of gear to break up any issues. Spray bottle, a shaker can, you just put pennies in and you shake it. You can also use like a milk jug. You can use rocks, stuff like that. A pet corrector, and then an air horn. When you're doing these intros, if the dogs are overcorrecting each other, you want to start with a spray bottle and work your way up. You never just want to instantly use the air horn. It's just like with the martingales, gentle leader, all that. You always want to start at the bottom and then work your way up. So like if the spray bottle, shaker can, and pet corrector are not working, that's when you go to the air horn. You never just want to start down at the end. The other thing is when you do these intros, you're always going to want to make sure they have their leash on, but they're dragging it. So it's off leash, but they have their leashes on. You're just not holding them. They have those leashes dragging, so that way it's easier way to break them up if there's an issue. I'm just going to show you like a little video on how we do them at Animal Control. So we always have the dogs smell each other up front. If the dog is leash reactive, that might not be the best idea, and I'm going to tell you how else to do it. So right here, they have those two leashes on. They smell each other. They both look pretty good. So then we're going to get him back away from that door, because you never want them right up in each other's face right at that door. And we're going to drop the leashes and let them go. Now, and if they have issues, then we're just going to use those leashes to get them back. Now, back in the beginning, if one of these dogs was losing their mind, let me just go for it just a little bit, then I would say, okay, we need to get one of them back. So sometimes we have to be strategic about this. If this dog that's inside is the one that's losing their mind, I might have the person take them kind of far away and do some eye contact, stuff like that, to distract them so they don't realize that dog is coming up. And then when the dog isn't in there, then we're having them drop the leashes and then they can meet. But we just never want that one dog that's being reactive to ever feel like they're trapped. Sometimes that barrier, that fence can add into that. Same thing with being on that leash. The barrier, like with the fence, we call that barrier reactivity, but it's very similar to leash reactivity. They just can't get to the dog and they get frustrated. Now, if the dog that was outside the kennel, outside was leash reactive, I probably would just end up walking completely away, going behind the truck, and I'd have the dog that's in the yard leave, and then I would go in the yard first, because otherwise that other dog's going to be on the leash the entire time when they're meeting that dog, because he's having to come up and smell the dog at that fence. So you just have to be strategic on how you do it. Knowing your dog is like that, of course, is the most helpful. And if you ever want to go through like extra training, definitely talk with them about that. If you ever want to see, more intros, I'm more than happy to show that. It's just a little bit harder right now since our shelter is empty, so I don't have that many dogs to be showing, but I can find some old videos. So yes, if you have any questions, let me know. And that's pretty much it. All right, let me sign off. Okay, thanks guys.